We're here. It's a Friday night on Outpost Unknown. Wait, let me restart that. I fucked that whole intro up. 5432. Ladies and gentlemen, take two on this intro. My name is Matthew. He is Jeremy.
Hey, everybody.
And we are here eXhuming the X-Files on the Outpost Unknown YouTube channel. Every Friday night, we talk the X-Files. We're working our way from Season 1 till we finish, whenever that may be. Hopefully it'll be Season 11, 10 years down the road, or whenever it is. We are not actually going to talk about Season 2 yet. We're not starting. We'll start that next Friday, so we'll talk about the first season, or first episode of Season 2. We are going to do what we'll probably do after every season is our season wrap up, and then we give our top 5 best episodes and top 5 worst episodes. Now, neither one of us know which episodes we have chosen, so it's going to be kind of fun and interesting to sort of see. Are we on the same page with what we liked the best and what we hated the most, or are we going to have some differences of opinion? Jeremy, I'll start this episode out with kind of like overall season 1 thoughts and feelings and recap. How did you feel revisiting season 1 of the X-Files?
I've been thinking I've wanted to do it for many, many years, like going on 20 years, I guess. You always think about it, and then the daunting task of sitting down and watching, 20 plus episodes of a show that are oftentimes, 45 minutes or longer. It was always something like, okay, maybe I'll do that next year. Maybe I'll do that next month. And I just never sat down to do it. And I think I've even talked with you going back years about revisiting this show. And then we just kind of, all right, well, let's give it a shot. Sat down and watched those first few episodes and like, this is really fun, especially, talking about it in depth with somebody that, we have a lot of similar feelings about our tastes and stuff, and particularly the weird shit. And I don't know, I've always thoroughly enjoyed discussing to way too much in depth about things that I'm somewhat passionate about. So revisiting this first season has been a blast. It's very, very good television, and it was nowhere near as hard to get through as just about any other show, particularly from this era when you think about going back and watching season 1 just to get through it so you can get to the good stuff.
Oh yeah, for sure. And again, I kind of echo those sentiments. I think the best part of doing these kind of things is getting to revisit it with friends. And you and I used to watch X Files all the fucking time. We talk about it at school, like the episode and stuff like that. And so, just getting a chance, and you and I don't get to hang out a ton anymore. And so just being able to sort of get together, on Saturday nights and just chat about something that we are very passionate about and that we really loved as a kid, and realizing as we go through the season is like, man, I love this just as much now as I did when I was a kid. Like, it wasn't one of those things where I started going through season 1. Obviously, there are some lowlights, and we'll talk about them. But the just sort of realizing, like, man, this is fucking good television. It really is. The vast majority of it aged really well. We're thinking about what this has been like 30 plus years ago when this stuff was on network television, and you're kind of like, oh god, is it really going to look as good? Is it going to look cheesy? Is it going to sort of live up to what it was in my mind? And I had watched various episodes over that time. It wasn't like I was completely devoid of X-Files throughout my life, but I'd never just sort of sat down and watched it from the pilot all the way through again. And yeah, I was this first season 1, I went into it sort of expecting, oh god, I feel like it's super up and super down, but mostly maybe kind of like not as good as the later seasons. But my thinking coming out of it was way better than I thought it was going to be. Like, there was way more cool episodes, or at least episodes I found entertaining, even if I didn't love them, than I thought. I guess I thought there'd be a lot more filler than it turned out to be.
And I completely agree with you. It was much more enjoyable than I thought, by far.
Yeah, and there's probably some all-time classics in season 1. A lot of times you don't really get to see the best So we're talking about television back in the day. Obviously, I think you mentioned on the last episode, you get the 8 and the 10 episode seasons that don't have any filler in it, and it's like banger after banger after banger after banger. But back then, there was just so much more time and content that they had to fill. You're not going to get 100% amazing quality every single time. And I think what this season also did was make me realize how much I love David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson's chemistry together. How I really loved how this season sparked my imagination. When I was a kid with the Monster of the Week episodes, it sparked my imagination. As an adult, it's kind of sparks my imagination, and that's kind of like the power of this show to me. Is that it was like, you know what, this is a show you could show anybody, any young kid, right? A 13-year-old, you could sit them down. Let's watch Tombs, right? And they're going to be like, wow, that was really really cool, that sort of thing. So yeah, overall, I think this was a really great season. Now, where it will rank later on down the road, as we see seasons 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, when they started really getting budgets and the production quality started getting much much higher, and you started getting a lot more talented writers on board, because a lot of the episodes of this season were one and done writers that we never hear from again. And I think that sort of skewed some of the quality, or sort of kept it down a little bit. But when they started dropping $20 million an episode on these things, and you start getting like cinema quality effects and just the look of the film, and eventually we'll get to the X-Files movie, Fight the Future, and all that. It's like, man, I can't wait to get to the rest of this stuff. Plus, I know it only gets better up at least through season 6. Before David Duchovny leaves the show, right? It's like it just keeps going up and up and up and up, and it makes me excited for season 2 and whatnot.
It was the movie Fight the Future, and that's what always had made me want to go back, because I remember it was an event. It was like
Oh yeah.
Friday night season finale of season 4 happened that Friday, and it was an episode that I think was longer than normal, and it continued the storyline that was presented at the end of season 4 continued into the movie Fight the Future, which debuted in theaters the following Friday. And then I want to say, wasn't it the Friday after that they began with season 5?
I don't remember honestly, but I feel like it was all very soon. Like it was all
Yeah,
very quickly.
I'm really sure that season 4 ended with a lead up to the movie. The following Friday, it debuted in theaters, which continued that storyline. And then the following Friday, season 5 began, and it continued the storyline from the movie. Like, it was a big fucking deal when I was a kid.
Oh yeah, and I think what people don't understand now, like if you're a young person, if you're 20 years old or whatever, you're listening to this show, that didn't happen. You did not have television shows that would have feature films in the middle of their runs. Like, for example, right now they're talking about, oh, The Mandalorian. They're going to make a Mandalorian and Grogu movie, right? That just seems like, oh, of course they would. Back then, that was unheard of. And so, the X-Files in the 90s was a cultural phenomenon. Like, tens of millions of people would watch these episodes. Now you see statistics that come out as like, oh wow, 10 million people watched an episode of Yellowstone. Well, that was fucking nothing back then. I mean, literally, like the Seinfeld finale, 100 million people watched the finale of Seinfeld. That's the kind of reach that cable television had back then. Because again, the internet wasn't as big as it is now. We didn't have streaming services. That's just kind of what you had to do. It was like appointment television, and sort of like a movie from the X-Files. The X-Files was so popular, they decided to make a movie out of it, and it was a huge thing. And so yeah, season 1, I think we really really enjoyed, and I also want to thank the subscribers out there who have left comments and subscribed from our various videos. It's kind of cool because part of the thing with Outpost Unknown is we don't really promote it at all. We just sort of post videos and stuff. Our whole concept behind this YouTube channel is we are just going to see if it grew organically. And it's always a thrill to see, like, we don't get tons and tons of views on these X Files videos, but it's cool. Like, I can get into the analytics and the statistics, and it's like, oh, we post an episode on Tombs, and boom, we get 3 subscribers from it. And it's just one of those thrills that there's other X Files fans out there that are kind of organically finding our show through the magic of the algorithm whenever YouTube decrees that we are worthy of popping up in other people's feeds. So thank you to our listeners out there who have subscribed, and we'll continue on this journey. Keep your comments coming. And on this particular episode, we're going to do our top 5 best of episode or season 1 and worst of season 1. Leave a comment. Tell us what your favorites of season 1 and worst of season 1 are. But I think we're going to start. There's a horrible storm coming our way, so we're going to try to get through this quickly before power gets knocked out here. But we're going to start with our top 5 worst episodes of the season. We'll go from 5 down to 1. 1 will be the absolute worst. 5 is the least worst of them. And we'll just go off and on. So we'll go ahead and start with you first, Jeremy. Your number 5 worst episode of season 1 and why?
Now, this is the very bottom, or this is the like the number
No,
1 of the 5?
your number 1 will be the absolute worst. This
Oh,
will be
okay. All right.
the least worst of the 5. We'll work
All
our
right.
way.
So my number 5 is the Jersey Devil.
Okay.
It's the only episode that I'd seen that it sucked. It was based around, like, I'm very, very sure that somebody just drew a bad picture of the Bigfoot
Yeah.
sighting film from back in the 70s, drew titties on it and said, let's do that. Like, and it's the only episode that made me feel really uncomfortable when an unarmed Mulder is laying on the ground and he's having this weird, like, attraction, sexual connection with this woman who does not shower ever.
Hot beast women, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Some people are
No,
into the hot beast women.
no. There was a lot. There are just a number of things that just happen in order to drive the plot forward in different various episodes, but it happens over and over and over in this episode. And you combine that with just the weird sexual stuff. I really did not like this episode.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair. Now, I want to point out to our listeners that you and I have not conferred with each other on what
Oh
our
no.
top 5 best or worst is. We have no idea. We're just kind of going to this blind. My number 5 is the Jersey Devil.
Yes.
The reason why is, man, I thought this was so disappointing because, like, when you hear the Jersey Devil, I want the fucking Jersey Devil in this show. I don't want, like, this cave woman running around, like, eating out of dumpsters and, killing dudes. I was so disappointed with this. And yeah, I do want, like, a photo. Like, I want to get a copy of that, like, big tittied Bigfoot so I can put it on my wall or something, like in my office or
Wear a
something.
t-shirt or a hoodie.
Yes. I mean, it's so funny, but it was just one of those things where it was so ridiculous and absurd. It didn't give me what I wanted it to, and so mostly at a disappointment. Jersey Devil is my number 5 of the worst season 1 episodes. So we'll go to you. Number 4. What is your number 4 worst?
Number 4 is Eve.
Oh, okay.
It was the little girls just ruined it for me because they were terrible actresses. And the entire show centered around them. I thought that I wanted a vampire episode. They were giving us a vampire episode, and then they did this weirdo bait and switch that never really
Yeah.
went anywhere. The blood draining never made the exsanguination was just an excuse to use the word 3 different times in the episode. When the girls were, like, trying to get away from them at the end and was about to trick them and get them killed, I thought all of that shit was just fucking stupid. How they tricked the actual Eve, who is supposed to be this superhuman intellect. She might have been insane, but she was still supposed to be like smarter than the average bear. But they poisoned her, anyway. So I just, I just didn't enjoy the episode
Yeah.
that much.
It's still got that one image that will always be burned into my mind of the Eve in the insane asylum with the yellow teeth.
Yeah.
That's just always going to be there for me. Okay, Eve. Eve. I think I liked Eve a little bit more than you did. Eve's not in my top five of the worst. I don't think it's great, but it's not in my top five. My number four is Ghost in the Machine. This is the killer artificial intelligence episode. This I felt was they had an idea. It was, I won't say ahead of its time in terms. There's obviously been killer AI stories well before that episode. But in terms of sort of what they were trying to do with it, I think they were way too ambitious, or they had too much ambitiousness in mind. They couldn't pull off any of what they wanted to do with any sort of believability with the budget that they had available to them. So this killer AI machine that's like locking people into like elevators and dropping them and shit like that. It looks stupid. It's shot stupid. The techno babble speak doesn't really age well at all. It really shows that they didn't quite have what they needed to there. So number four for me, Ghost in the Machine. Ah, didn't like that one. So we'll go to you for number three.
Number three was space. And you got to keep in mind, there are, and I'm just going to put this out front, there are worse episodes, forgettable episodes in this season that I probably could have nominated as just completely missable. Stuff that you would never ever watch again. But I wanted to put those ones out front that were just absolutely fun to talk shit about. The ones that I have the most notes on are the worst episodes. And the space one, like I found things to like about it, but there was so much hokey bullshit going on in that episode where using, old space footage, the ghost face coming out of the ceiling, coming out of him, the the going through the window at the hospital instead of just bouncing off of it, the drinking, the reason that that lady got attacked in the car by the big fog thing, like none of it really made any fucking sense.
Yeah.
And you couple that with like a lot of really bad special effects and shit that just happened in order to happen, made for just a garbage episode.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see if space shows up on my list at some point here, but I'll table my thoughts on space if and when I get to it here. So, my number three worst of season one is Shadows. This is the one where the chick's boss sort of comes back as a ghost, and we get like the telekinesis and hiding of, God, what was it? The microchip or no, it was a floppy disk in the wall and all of that stuff. To me, and we talked a little bit about this on some previous episodes of Born Again and Roland, how those also had the same kind of themes to them. This was the initial mover because I was trying to decide between Born Again, Roland, and In Shadows. Like, which one would I put on here as the absolute worst? And I feel like even though Born Again might technically be worse than Shadows, Shadows was the one that started off the bullshit that we got with Born Again and Roland as well. Like, they thought that this idea was so good, they went to the well twice more. So I'm
In
gonna
the
put
same season.
yeah. So I'm going to put the blame and the most hate on Shadows here. I just, man, I thought this episode was just so uninteresting, so boring, especially when so many other episodes early on were so good that this just like put a halt to the momentum.
It really
In
did.
the early season, like, oh god. So Shadows is my number three worst of season one. So you're number two.
The one that was your previous one a couple ones back, the AI one.
Oh, Ghost in
Again,
the Machine. Okay.
it a, a potentially interesting episode. Could have been very very good. Ended up crawling around in a vent, a dirty vent. And
Scully was firing the gun in the vent as it's trying to blow her into whatever. It's so hilarious.
it was not a well executed episode. Did not enjoy it. It was shit. And similarly to what you were just talking about, it was another one of those episodes where something had to be bad, I guess, but it's like a stumbling block in the momentum of the show. Like this episode just
Yeah.
shows up and it's like this sucks. Why if you had watched the previous week's episode alone and you're like this show is awesome. Next week I'm going to bring my friend out Friday and we're going to watch it. And you sit down and watch this, it's like
It's a
it,
good
it
point.
gets better.
Yeah, that's a good point. I would have rather them have just done some like generic alien thing that have some of these episodes that we're talking about in here that kills the momentum of the series and not good, not good. Okay, well we're on two, right? My number two is Shapes, the werewolf episode, or quote unquote
I knew this was
werewolf.
coming. I knew it was coming.
God, I hated this episode so much. It's like it fails as a werewolf story. It's so boring. It's so boring to watch, and it's just like you're waiting, you're hoping for this badass werewolf transformation, and you don't get it at all. It looks so stupid. Mulder and Scully are doing dumb shit throughout this. I'll give it credit for trying to incorporate kind of like a Native American element to it, where it's not just your classic American kind of werewolf sort of story, but it just kind of comes off as feeling a little cringy towards Native American culture in a way. Like it doesn't present them in the greatest light, even though it's attempting to try to do something novel there. Shapes, fucking terrible. I hated it. That's my number two.
And I knew it was coming. That's why I just excluded it from my list. It was bad. It was one, and it was one of the first ones you see where they just use the shit out of dark camera angles just to cover up how
Yeah,
awful their special effects can be
yeah.
sometimes.
All right,
So
the
the
worst.
the worst episode of the season, Lazarus.
Oh, okay, okay. Tell
There
me
was
why.
from the cartoon. Let me fucking go back because I scribbled all over my notes page in anger.
Lazarus. Okay, I was not expecting you to go there. Okay, interesting.
The it was the first episode that had tons of just wild jumping to conclusions for Mulder that was just so outlandish. Like he jumped to
Okay.
the body switching conclusion early on in the episode. It's like you have nothing that would ever just didn't even make any sense. The stupid tattoo that so fucking stupid.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I
Um,
remember the tattoo now.
there, there, there was a movie around this time. I think it was The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox, and I like that movie. And it's about a killer who comes back to like haunt his to be with his killer woman ex fiance too. And this episode reminded me of that. I think they stole a lot of things from it. They
Oh
just did it
yeah. Okay.
so
I can see
much
that.
fucking worse. Um, I
Anything
just
else?
I mean,
You're
I'm
at a
just
loss for words,
I'm
kid.
just looking. I'm looking at all my stuff and like everything I wrote. It's just a bad fucking
Yeah.
episode.
Yeah. I could
Just
totally see that. I guess Lazarus wasn't even kind of like on my radar. Maybe that is a testament to how poorly it works that we just watched it fairly recently. I had forgotten it existed, like even though we had just watched it. But okay, cool. Lazarus, number one for you. My number one worst season one episode. I mean, you kind of said it all. It's space. I thought everything about space. Now, going into season one was a revisit. I always felt that space was the one I was dreading getting to because I always remember hating that episode. I don't think I there was ever a point, even when I watched these things as a kid, that I liked that episode. And I was very very concerned. And then I went into it again, and man, I mean everything you said to a T. It's so stupid. Even like the continuity errors, like when the NASA lady crashes her car in a pouring rainstorm, and the very next shot, it's completely dry out, and Mulder and Scully are pulling her out of the car. It just feels like everything about that episode was so low rent, so low effort. It's like a clearance rack version of the X Files to me. The effects, the story of it, like what? Oh, it was some alien ghost from outer space getting into the bodies of astronauts. Like why? For what reason? I don't know. Nothing's ever explained. I hate space. It's my absolute worst episode of season one. So there you go. I mean, three of the five we had in similar. My five was Jersey Devil, four Ghost in the Machine, three Shadows, two Shapes, and one Space. So those were mine. Um, yeah, bad episodes all around. So let's move on to the good stuff. So I'll start first this time so that you can have the final best
Satisfaction of
one.
knowing we basically said the same thing. All right.
So okay, so my number five of best episodes of season one is actually going to be the pilot episode, and the reason why I chose this. Because I came up with these after I watched the Erlenmeyer Flask, the final episode of season one, and I was revisiting these in my mind, and the pilot episode is what got me into this show. The pilot does the perfect thing in which it gets you to love these two main characters immediately. It sets up the whole kind of like alien stuff and the conspiracies going along with it. It's just a really cool story and mystery, and you don't usually see that in pilot episodes. They usually have some just sort of generic sort of thing, and then everything after that is changed and shifted based on audience reactions and network executives and stuff. But the pilot episode to me really encapsulated everything that the X Files was going to be and the potential that it had for me as a viewer. And so even now I go back to that, I'm like, man, this is just an awesome episode. I love it. It made me a fan of X Files. It made me love this show, for my entire life. So I got to give it the credit it's due. Pilot is my number five of the best season one episodes.
My number
Your number
five
five. Yep.
is the first the episode that cemented it for me. Now there was a lot of them that came before that I really really enjoyed, but the one episode that drove the nail in the coffin for me was Fallen Angel.
Ah, yes.
It started well with the that we have this secret NORAD like tracking facility that's constantly watching stuff come out of space, and we have some dude that's in charge of crash recovery, all the way down to Max getting abducted by the end. We got to watch it happen, which was, kind of fire in the sky esque, but
Yeah.
I can't remember which came first, this episode or that. But it might have been the first time that I'd ever seen somebody get abducted like that. And I just, I loved it. I was waiting for something like that to happen since Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I finally got it. And this is the show, or this is the episode that, like, all right, I'm doomed to watch all of this from now on.
Gonna chase that high
Yeah,
from
yes,
now
sir.
on. Okay, cool. Well, it's interesting you say that because my number four is Fallen Angel.
Yes,
and
sir.
and the reason why I love this so much, I think a lot of this comes down to the character of Max. Not only, of course, I love all of the stuff surrounding it, and of course the alien component of it, and the investigation, and Mulder and Scully, and all of that. But the character of Max, I think we might have mentioned this when we did the episode, was we just I personally just really kind of identified with that guy. I was so, into aliens and UFOs and supernatural kind of stuff when I was a kid, reading all kinds of books. We go to the Bramer Center, get books and read them and stuff like that. I was just like, that felt like me. Like if I was kind of like an adult, I'd be living in some weird camper RV on the side of the road with like radio, trying to get different transmissions from the military bases to find that kind of stuff. And he was so passionate about what he believed in, that that character just really really stood out to me. And yeah, you're absolutely right. The finale where he gets sort of abducted and he's glowing blue, and Mulder's like staring up at him, and you're just like, oh my god,
Yeah, that was
what am I watching? What am I going to see in the subsequent episodes from this? And it's one of those things that just absolutely captures you. So yeah, my number 4 is Fallen Angel. I love that episode as well.
my number 4 is Squeeze.
Okay.
It it was a horror based episode that was, I think, episode 3 of the season. Um, it got, I can't even remember. Toombs is obviously in it, though I didn't know him by that name back then. It wasn't until the second episode that it was really kind of driven home. But it was gross.
Yeah.
It had a really interesting guy. The special effects in it were light but effective enough to make it believable that this guy would hibernate and get livers and all of that shit. So, and it was just it did the creepy stuff really really well. And the finale on it might have been one of the first times that they did that. Is this guy gonna get out? Are we gonna see this guy thing
Yeah.
again at the end of the episode? And kind of set the tone for those going forward as being, the first time that had ever happened. So Squeeze is my number 4.
Okay. My number 3 is Squeeze. I love this episode. Now, a lot of people I've seen like previous people giving their like top 10 rankings and stuff, and they always put Squeeze and Tombs like as the same episode. I don't consider them the same episode. I consider them different. The reason why I think Squeeze is superior to Tombs is Squeeze is that was that initial Monster of the Week episode. It was the first one that X Files ever did. So when I'm watching this as a kid, I just am assuming it's always going to be about aliens. Like that's what my assumption was going forward. I think this might have been the third or fourth episode of the season, and before that, it was all alien stuff. And I remember just being like, "Wow, we can do stuff that's not aliens. They're gonna have monsters on this. Like, what kind of other monsters can we have?" And the guy who played Toombs was so creepy and so greasy and gloopy, and is
Gross and
he just
sweaty.
yeah, and it was so good, and the interplay between Mulder and Scully was really good in that episode. And yeah, Squeeze was just one of those monsters that I was like, okay, cool. I don't know what I'm going to get. Every week could be something completely different with this show, and I like that. I think it was a good choice to not just only do alien stuff, but also delve into monsters. If only they could have actually done the Jersey Devil rather than naked cave woman, dirty, horny beast woman. If only. So that's my number 3 is Squeeze.
My number 3 is Gender Bender.
Oh, okay.
And this is, I like, there was always kind of a weirdness and mystique around the Amish. There still kind of is, though I know a lot more about them now. But I always kind of liked stories about religious cults and what drives them and stuff like that. So we had Graber with his raw sex appeal. We had the investigations where they just went out into the woods and all of a sudden they're surrounded by people that they didn't show any special effects or anything, but do these people have supernatural powers to all of a sudden surround a couple of armed FBI agents?
Yeah.
And then all the way to, investigating the barn, the underground ritual, and then the end of being stonewalled with that white clay. it stuck with me when I was a
Yeah.
kid as something that was like, that is fucking awesome. And I'm kind of sad that they never came back around and revisited these guys ever again in a
Yeah.
future episode to give us more, because that ending was a big blue ball ending, but it was just so well done that it left me starved for more story about where these people were from, what were they actually. And I love that episode then. I love this episode now.
Okay. Yeah. 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 The thing that will always stand out about that episode is that dude just making Scully horny as shit. And then Mulder was like, Scully, you're about to like fuck that dude before I walked in. Like, you're gonna ride him like a stallion. And Scully's like, oh god. And she's like so embarrassed in the car. It's so funny. Cool. All right. Well, my number two, and I struggled between two and number one for me. This my number two is probably my favorite of season one, but I don't think it's the best episode of season one. So my number two, my personal favorite, is Ice. I loved everything about this. Probably because I'm a huge fan of John Carpenter's The Thing. It's in my top five of favorite movies of all time. So I loved all the nods and the homages to that film. But I thought that this was the very first episode of the X Files where it was really about the sort of trust issue between Mulder and Scully and all of these great cast of character actors that were surrounding them, trapped in this actually Arctic sort of research facility with this worm sort of like going about. I thought like the sequences where they show the worm crawling like under the dog's skin
Yeah.
creeped me out. The all of the actors in it were just top notch. The way that it was the opening sequence of this always sticks to me. Like there will be days where I will go just be walking around like we are not who we are. We are not who we are because it's so creepy and it's always stuck with me. And I think they did such a good job. It was really the first time we saw Mulder and Scully not trust each other, which I thought was an awesome dynamic. How they really turned that, from where like they will always support each other to where they really didn't like each other. And so I thought Ice is my personal favorite, even though I don't think it's the best episode of season one. But Ice is my number two.
My number two is Tombs.
Oh, okay, cool. So you're one of the cool people who are like they're two separate episodes, or not just
Well,
one episode together.
in I'm forgetting the actor's name that plays Tombs, but in this episode, I think they had so much fun with the previous episode that they just let him work in this one. You got a little bit
Yeah.
more
Okay.
personality, but I knew
Yep.
from the moment he picked up that dead rat in the gutter and then turned around and just slurped his fingers, like, oh, that's so fucking gross. I knew I was gonna love this episode, and I wasn't let down. And then when you told me the part at the end when he was supposed to be fully clothed in his nest,
Yeah.
he's like, no, no, lube me up. I'm going out nude. Like, respect the method,
Yes.
because
Method actor.
the scene was horrifying when he came out of there, and then he got ground up in fucking Escalade. Like that episode was very, very good, and it expanded upon the previous one's lore by quite a bit. I'm glad they didn't wait until another season to do this. That it was still kind of fresh in
Yeah.
my memory, and I just had so much fun with this episode.
Yeah, yeah, it is definitely a cool episode. I think the one thing that brings it down for me, and I can't get into my top five, is there was so much recap for the first episode that they had to do in this because again, back in the day, if you missed Squeeze and you're a new viewer at X Files, like, oh, I hear this show's good, you'd have no fucking idea what Tombs is because they didn't replay these episodes. Like, if you missed it, you missed it. You'd have to wait till the summertime when they re-showed everything in order again before you'd even get to it. So it's kind of like the recap nature of some of it that kind of brings it down a little bit for me. But yeah, it's still an awesome fucking episode. I still really, really love it. Okay, my number one, and again, not my personal favorite, but it is the best, and I have to respect it as the best for me personally, and that is Beyond the Sea.
Mhm.
I think this episode was the by far the best written, the best acted. I think it had an amazing story. I think it's a supernatural story, but not supernatural in the way of like, hey, we got someone who's telekinetic or psychic or something. I loved Brad Dourif in this. Brad
Mhm.
Dourif is so incredible in this with how he just his performance and it's not he's not just a bad dude. It's like they established that like yeah he was a bad dude. He was killing everybody, but when he goes to death row that first time and he sees all of his victims around him and he's like he never wants to go back to death row, and how he's actually trying to help Mulder and Scully even though they don't believe it. For most of the episode he's actually trying to do it, and then you bring in the whole element with Scully's dead dad trying to give her that final message and her refusing to hear the final message, and her having that sort of tender moment with Mulder at the end. She'd rather be in the hospital with him than hearing the message. By this point, she believes Brad Dourif, Luther Lee Boggs. She believes him, but she still chooses to be with Mulder in the hospital than hear the final message that her dad was trying to give her. Pitch perfect. Love everything about this episode. It is the best. Beyond the Sea for me personally. It was my number one.
And as a surprise to no one, my number one is also Beyond the Sea.
Okay, cool, cool.
Um, so David Duchovny, I love him as an actor. He took a back seat in this role for the first time during the
Yep.
season, and it allowed Gillian Anderson to work with Brad Dourif, and they elevated each other's performances to allow. There are good episodes in this season, but there's the acting and the quality of that acting in this episode stands head and shoulders above any other episode in this season for me. I cared about a lot or all of these people. I cared about their or the struggle that Scully was having with her father, and uh, I I even cared about Mulder trying like the whole flipping thing where Scully was the believer and Mulder was the skeptic. Finally, in the
Yeah.
episode, like there's I'm sorry, but there's no doubt that this is the best episode of
Yeah.
the season.
Yeah, yeah. I love that moment when Scully confronts Brad Dourif, and after Ben Mulder's been shot, and she goes off on that rage, and she's like, "If he dies, I'm gonna kill you, you son of a bitch!" And she's just like screaming, like she acted her ass off in that.
Mhm.
And when you go back and think about how the network didn't want her as Scully because they thought whether she was too young or wasn't good enough or she wasn't attractive enough or whatever their reasons were at the time. It's so great that Chris Carter like held his ground. It was like, no, no, no. She is Scully, because in her acting just over the course of the show gets better and better and better. But this was that episode where you're like, okay, yeah, she can hold her own with anybody. You give her the good material to work with, and she can hold her own with everybody. And to this day, she's a great actress. She's in all kinds of awesome stuff. So yeah, Beyond the Sea. If any of you have listened to all of our episodes, that was probably the obvious conclusion. I think we gushed about that episode when we talked about it a lot. So, yeah, my five: Pilot, Fallen Angel, Squeeze, Ice, and Beyond the Sea. So again, three of the five we had in common. So yeah, that's it, everybody. That's our recap of season one of the X Files and our best and worst of the season. Please leave a comment. Tell us what you think. What were your top five best and worst of season one? We'll get you out of here on this, Jeremy. If you had to give a letter grade for season one overall, so if we're just going to kind of grade it on the sort of elementary school grading scale, what letter grade would you give Season 1, adding pluses and minuses and things of that nature.
This got a B plus for me.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to go B. I'll give it a solid B. Well, the only reason I would not give it a B plus is I feel like there was a little too many filler. Let's be straight. Space. Fuck that. I downgrade it for space alone. It's got to come down a little bit. But yeah, awesome first season. I'm looking forward to season 2. So next week, ladies and gentlemen, we will be back with a new episode. We're going to start season 2, and the very first episode is Little Green Men. So we're gonna find out if season 2 starts out with a bang, and I'm actually very excited for the second episode of season 2 because that's one of my favorite X-Files episodes ever. That's the host with the Fluke Man monster in the sewers. I love that one so much. But thank you for listening, everybody. We'll catch you next Friday here on Outpost Unknown, where we will be exhuming the X-Files. See you then.